So
Well,
the higher training for virtuous. So how about that adhicitta? And my question actually is, it seems to me that I am learning how to swim, but there's no chance for me to swim at all. There's no swimming pool in the backyard of my house. And in the future, I won't have any possibility to swim.
we don't want to dig.
And my chip,
there's a big lake almost across from your cottage.
No, but it's just a metaphor. And I can I can jump. Okay, I can high jump. So my question is, if Chitta and Hataka are two foremost lay disciples, what are their, maybe I can model after them. So what will their way of practicing, like for example, at the Sila for them means 10 wholesome, to perform the 10 wholesome deeds.
Yeah.
And how about that at the Chitta, that higher training of mind? Because by definition, it's always the 4 jhanas. Right? But if that's also for the monastics, is it possible? That's only for, I believe at the Panna, at the wisdom, higher training of wisdom, should be the same for lay people and monastics.
Yeah, the same with adhicitta. Adhicitta doesn't, it's not in any way a special prerogative for monastics, but it's just that there's a fixed definition. Excuse me?
Prerogative?
Privilege. It's not a special privilege for monastics. It's just that there's a fixed definition of adhicitta that you find, we've already come across it in Anguttara Book of Threes, somewhere in the 80s. It's the 4 jhanas.
It's also applicable to lay people?
Yeah, actually there are lay people who gain the 4 jhanas, yeah.
No, I mean, what are the 3 higher trainings for lay people, by definition? So that I can model after them and model after Chitta and Hataka, instead of those people who can swim and they have a swimming pool.
I have to say, I'm not understanding your symbols. I'm a simple fellow. Let's just keep it straight. So you're asking for a layperson, what is the adhisila, adhicitta, adhipanya?
Right.
Okay, first let's see what the definition given in the text. Okay, you find this in Book of Threes, Sutta number 85, I think, in that area. Yeah, though generally, you see, the Buddha usually explains this, illustrating it with the example of the monk, since he's primarily addressing the order of monks, or the order of monastics, so he chooses the bhikkhu. But we have the definition, let's see, 85, 87. Okay, so adhi-sila, the higher virtuous conduct, it's defined in relation to the monk as the observance of the rules of the patimokkha, the monastic code. So let us say for a layperson, probably you could use this Hatthaka Sutta as a basis and say it would be the observance of the 10 kinds of wholesome conduct. Not killing, not stealing, not sexual misconduct, 4 kinds of right speech, 3 kinds of right thought. Then what is the adhicitta, the higher mind? Again, you get the standard definition of the 4 jhanas. What is the higher wisdom? Understanding as it really is the 4 noble truths. So those are, you could say, are very concise definitions. And for the practice, let's say the practice of the adhicitta, you could say would be undertaking the practice that culminates in the jhanas. And the practice, or let's say the training in the higher wisdom, would be undertaking the practice that leads to the realization of the Four Noble Truths. And so those would be all of the trainings, the more fundamental trainings that are intended to generate wisdom. I think we have to realize that the suttas, because they're orally transmitted, so they often use these standardized formulas to explain key concepts. But one shouldn't attach too tightly to the standardized formulas and take them in a rather narrow, rigid, and dogmatic sense. Does that make sense? Excuse me? No, it does to me. It does to you.
But then when you say the 10 wholesome
ways of wholesome conduct,
yeah, 10 wholesome 10 kinds of conduct. That's for lay people. That's your own explanations, right?
No, what I'm basing that on the sutta that we took, the Hatthaka Sutta. Hatthaka says that he observed the higher sila, the higher conduct, and then the commentary says, oh, I can't get it on the screen now. The commentary says, because I think the commentary is aware that in other suttas, adhisila is defined by way of the monastic, the observance of the monastic rules. So the commentary just says something like the tenfold, I think it says like the 10 ways of wholesome conduct. Yeah, so that's it.
What would you say about the higher, the adhicitta for lay people?
I think adhicitta is the same. There's no distinction whether a monastic or lay person. At the culmination, the adhicitta will be the attainment of the 4 jhanas, the meditative absorptions. But we could say we're practicing the training in the adhicitta. One is training, undertaking the practices, aiming at the attainment of the jhanas. So even if you're undertaking, just mindfulness of breathing, or the meditation on loving kindness, training with the aspiration, the intention of developing that to the point of the jhanas, then one is taking the practice of the adhicitta. Even though the adhicitta itself would be the attainment of the jhana, but this is the practice directed towards the adhicitta, the higher mind.
But you also mentioned that Hatthaka was not particularly good, or nothing is mentioned about his meditative achievement, right? And he also is.
Well, he must. I would assume. Go on, please.
And he was the foremost in those 4 vatus.
Yeah.
And are those 4 means of sustaining a big group of retinue conducive to achieve meditative state, so that one can...
I think so. It seemed to me that that would be obstruction to meditative attainment.
Right.
Because if you have like a large group of people around you, you're always getting telephone calls and bombarded with email messages. or invited to this event, that event. So I don't, go.
And they still have to achieve, to fulfill the requirement of higher chitta as for jhanas.
Yeah. So maybe Hatthaka had a natural skill in meditation. I didn't intend to say that he wasn't skilled in meditation. It's just that, so far as I know, the suttas don't particularly mention meditative achievements in relation to him. Whereas I think, say, Chitta the householder, I'm trying to think. Actually, I'm not so sure with Chitta the householder also. Okay.
Maybe they can practice the meditation on Brahma Vihara.
Yeah, possible.
That could reach the 4 jhanas, right?
Yeah.
So if you practice the practice of means to attract retinue, it will help you practice compassion, help you practice
exactly.
metta.
Yeah.
So I actually think that still is achievable.
Yeah.
If you keep the sila pure.
Yeah. They take the microphone.
I was being devil's advocate. I think sila is, Yorong makes a really good point, sila really is paramount, because a person could achieve the jhanas and not necessarily be enlightened or even...
Yeah, certainly.
They could do it just because they want the iddhis.
Because they want the iddhis. Yeah.
Literally just for that. It can be done, but then and it doesn't necessarily mean one is evil, per se.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it just for that purpose, even if you're nice, it's not going to, achieve anything in terms of, realization.
Yeah.
So I know people get like, oh my God, the jhanas, and they're important. But I think people should also realize there is another side to the jhanas.
Yeah.
That's all. And like I said, you're wrong. Like the sila morality, that's the real key, the key thing.
Yeah, so coming back to the point Yorong made, it would seem, let's say, people's temperaments are just so varied. So somebody could be very sociable with a lot of people around, and of course being involved with a lot of people would tend to be obstructive to the jhanas, because for that one needs to focus and collect the mind. And if you're involved with a lot of social activities, that would be somewhat obstructive. But there are people who just have this natural tendency towards samadhi, and so they could be involved with a lot of people, a lot of activities, but when they go off into quiet place, they can gain samadhi very quickly and easily. Whereas others go off into seclusion, not very sociable, and they go off into seclusion, and there's a lot of mental commotion. So it's very hard to make, blanket statements about this one or that one.
Because I made the comment because I know that I'm a follower of Venerable Yinshun's teachings.
Yeah.
So he talked a lot about, it's not him, he used the Mahayana suttas to talk about the importance for the Mahayanas to practice the meditation on Brahma Viharas.
Yeah.
And I think my understanding is that the basis of any kind of concentration practice in Buddhism is sila, is the virtue.
Yeah, that is
so
a good.
if you're in a society and you don't engage in chatter, and you always keep the mind, and when we do giving, we need to have the intention of giving and giving toward the liberation of oneself and others, is actually a much more higher demand on the virtuous virtuous conduct. So if you keep that, and then when you get the chance to practice meditation, I think the meditation will be so much easier because we have a strong foundation of the mind being ready
definitely.
to get concentrated.
Yeah, definitely.
So
definitely.
I struggled for a long time in Mahayana Buddhism. How do we practice? It's impossible to practice. Now I know the 10 ways to wholesome karma is extremely important. It was emphasized again and again in our study as Mahayanist. So I think that part should not be overlooked from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's not only your perspective, that is fundamental Buddhist teachings. To go deep into meditation, the proper meditation has to be built on that foundation of wholesome conduct.
I have a very weird question.
Doesn't matter. The weirder, well, I was going to say the weirder the better, but maybe maybe I shouldn't say that. Let's say weird questions are okay.
When you were telling the story about Hataka, you said that he was originally given to a demon, and then the Buddha had a talk with the demon, and the demon realized that what he did was wrong, and changed his mind. I thought in my mind, did the demon become a heavenly being after he changed his mind? I want to know what kind of demon it is.
Okay, it's the Pali word for that kind of being is called Yakka, or Sanskrit Yaksha. And the Yakkhas are sort of they have a double nature. Sort of the basic way of the Yakka, the basic nature is to be somewhat violent and destructive, but they're not fixed in that mode of behavior. They can change over and become almost angelic. Yeah, so what happened with this Yakka Alavaka, you can find it actually, the sutta, it's in the Tiki-nipata, chapter 1, sutta number, could be 10 or 14. And also it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of verses. It's the Yakkhas Sangyutta, which is, I don't remember the chapter number, but it's the Yakkhas Sangyutta. It's the Alavaka Sutta. So it happened, he had this conversation with the Buddha, where he asked the Buddha, actually at the beginning of the sutta, he tells the Buddha, I'm going to ask you some questions. If you fail to answer me, I'm going to pick you up by your feet and fling you across the Ganges River, or else I'm going to break your heart. I'm going to take over your mind, to overthrow your mind and smash your heart, something like that. And then the Buddha says, I do not see anyone in this world who could pick me up by the feet and fling me across the Ganges River, or who could overturn my mind and smash my heart. But ask your questions. Then Alavaka asks the questions, several series of questions, and then the Buddha answers, and then at the end of the discussion, then Alavaka gets very elated, full of joy with the Buddha's answers. And then he says, from now on, I'm going to travel from village to village and from town to town, proclaiming the virtues of the Buddha and the excellence of the Dhamma.
Well, are the Yakshas considered beings in the lower realms or a being in the higher realm?
Yeah, they seem to be. Technically, they're classified as one of the one of the realms that come under the heaven of the four great kings, but that's not really like a heavenly world, the realm of the four great kings, but those are four types of beings that are connected with the earth, but they're not visible to us. So one of the Yakshas, who are like these fierce demonic beings. Another are the Nagas, the dragon spirits. A third is the Gandhabas or Gandharvas. Those are spirits that dwell in trees and flowers and fruits, flower trees, fruit trees. And the fourth is called the Kumbhandas. It's a kind of gnome-like being that's supposed to live deep in the forests and to guard hidden treasures. Okay, so the Yakshas are a class of beings that seem to be in some way dwelling on the earth, on the earthly plane, though they're not visible to us. You know, of course, it would be taken over into Buddhism from pre-Buddhistic indigenous belief systems. You know, so it's a question, how literally are we to take these suttas that speak about those kinds of beings? But actually, there are cases of people who get spirit possession, possessed by spirit. That could be seen as the yaksha taking over the person. And in my view, it's not just a psychological derangement, the way a modern psychologist would diagnose this. I've seen this happen myself in Sri Lanka, where a person, I've seen it actually at least twice in Sri Lanka. A person who is quite mild-mannered, quiet, reserved, then gets taken over by this, apparently taken over by the spirit, and they become very fierce and violent. But they don't hit other people. They don't do any. Actually, we have more yakshas here in that sense in America than you find amongst the Yakkhas in traditional Buddhist countries. But they'll start shouting and stamping the ground, and they behave very, very differently. So you find it difficult to identify that person, and speaking in a very different voice, behaving in very different ways. And even a kind of strange odor comes out from the person in that state. So it seems that they're taken over by some other being. How do we get into this?
Bhante, could I ask more another question?
Yeah.
What happened to Chitta, the householder, after he passed away? Was he also reborn as a deva?
Actually, he was reborn as a deva. You have to look in the Anguttara Nikaya. Since I can't get into the computer, I can't look up that sutta. It's the last sutta in, as I said, there's a chapter 41. It's a short sutta, just a short chapter, about 12 suttas. And it's the last sutta, speaks about the passing away of Chitta. Nobody has the Anguttara Nikaya with them.
Bhante, Anathapindika also reborn in the heaven, right?
Yeah, Anathapindika was reborn in the Tusita heaven.
So Bhante, it seems to me the best route for a lay practitioner is to practice the 10 wholesome deeds, and then reborn in one of the 6 sensual heavenly the 6 heavenly realms in the sensual world, right?
Why do you say that's the best? Why not the form realm?
because by practicing giving, one cannot be reborn in the former realm.
Because by
as
practicing what?
giving, generosity, one could only be reborn in the one of the
But a
six.
lay practitioner can develop the Brahmaviharas or the jhanas and be reborn in the form realm.
That's my next point. So being a lay person, I don't have to devote my time to meditation. All I need to do is the 10 wholesome deeds and then reborn in one of those 6 heavens in the central world, and then come back to listen to the Dharma in this world.
Actually, that's what most most of the Buddhists in the traditional Buddhist countries, that's their aspiration, is to come back into this world at the time when Maitreya Buddha appears in the world. Well, there's so many pages to scroll through. You have to scroll through them all? Maybe go back to the table of contents. Yeah, but I wanted part 4. Ah, okay, now I see how to do it. Wow, this is really slow. Ah, this is interesting. Yeah, this is, in this sutta, Chitta, the householder, is in a conversation with Niganta Nataputta, the founder of Jain, or at least the leading teacher of Jainism. And here Chitta, the householder, tells Niganta Nataputta that whenever he wants, he can enter and dwell in the 4 jhanas. Seeing the second. Yeah, when Chitta, the householder, is lying on his deathbed, the devas come to him and they say, you should make a wish to become in the future a wheel-turning monarch, a universal monarch. But Chitta, the householder, says to them, that too is impermanent, that is unstable. One must abandon that too and pass on. Yeah, it just says that he passed away. Okay. Yeah, wasn't so helpful to settle that question. But since he attained the 4 jhanas, then he must have been, and I think he was a non-returner. So in that case, he must have been reborn in one of the pure abodes. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, please. And take the wireless mic.
So I don't know if this is like, this is kind of problematic or a contradiction. So I'm trying to understand, because whenever you're doing something for a particular outcome, so if that outcome is to come back, you know, during a for a particular reason, like gain, then isn't that reasoning to understand, like to deduce that the individual is doing something based on lack of genuineness or lack of sincerity? So although that the intentions on the objective aspect will be perceived as honest,
Yeah.
but the subjective notion of the intent before
Yeah.
it manifests, that action, that reasoning is still insincere. So
You said that there's insincere.
yeah, insincere.
Yeah.
So isn't that problematic in what the message is trying to say in the first place?
Of course, if one is doing something that seems to be good, but for some kind of self-gain,
Yeah.
or with some insincere motivation, of course that will deter, that will I'm trying to get the word, that will corrode, you could say, the goodness of the action. Yeah.
Okay. So, but that's where I guess I'm a little confused. So why, if individual is claiming that, okay, I will practice this based out of wholesomeness,
Yeah.
but then unconsciously they're stating, well, I'm actually doing this just so that I can come back into this realm because of this.
Yeah.
Isn't that contradictory?
I don't think so, because one understands that actions produce consequences, and one wants to gain certain, let's say, secure conditions or favorable conditions for oneself, for one's own spiritual progress. And so for that reason, that one will cultivate wholesome actions with the understanding that those actions function as causes, producing effects that will contribute to one's development in the future.
Okay, so I guess it would be in reverse. So then after it goes out, then it'll come back as in becoming sincere based on like.
Well, one is doing it, I would say, sincerely, even though that there is a bit of a self-motivation here, a self-centered motivation, but one is not doing it in a greedy, selfish way, but one understands that in order to progress, it's necessary to have suitable conditions that will be conducive to one's progress.
Gotcha.
And so then one sees that the conditions in which one finds oneself are, to some extent, the results of the karmic seeds that we create. And so one creates the karmic seeds in the hope or with the wish of establishing the suitable conditions for one's practice in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, unless, Allison, you had some? Yeah. I think it's on.
Okay. Bande, I have a question, just a simple question, is that it seems that we, in the whole sutra, for example, like today's class,
Yeah.
it's a lot of things. There is discrimination, not talking about gender discrimination, it's like good
Yeah.
and kind,
Yeah.
wholesome and wholesome,
Yeah.
and greed and not greed. And even from the beginning of our practice, even the beginning of engaging with Buddhism, is always talking about this dichotomous good and
Yeah,
bad,
yeah.
and wholesome and wholesome.
Yeah.
And so there is a requirement to have the investigation ability, discrimination ability.
Yeah.
But that is wisdom based. So how do you, if I'm a beginner,
Yeah.
if I'm a greed driven human being,
Yeah.
how am I able to distinguish what is good or is not good? And it's almost become a personal, or it become a arbitrary. And that is my question here. For example, the sutra, they're talking about the quality of a woman, a bad quality. And that make me think about how do you establish the discrimination ability, and how do you able to have awareness of what we are doing in terms of how in terms of our own executing our disability, our discrimination ability.
I didn't quite catch the last phrase. Say it again.
So how are we going to be able to examine our aware the quality of our discrimination ability?
Okay, so that's a very good question, very important question. Okay, first I would say that, because of our own minds are clouded over with delusion, capacity for self-deception, lack of clear understanding. So we certainly have many guidelines in the discourses of the Buddha for seeing what is unwholesome, what is wholesome, what is the roots of the unwholesome, what are the roots of the wholesome. So we have, for example, on the unwholesome side, the Buddha lays this out very clearly in these numerical lists. So the 10 types of unwholesome karma, 10 types of wholesome karma. 5 precepts, for guidance in everyday life. What are the states that are the defilements of the mind? So we have the 3 root defilements, 16 more extensive list of 16 defilements. We have these various numerical sets. This gives us some understanding, or this gives us some guidance, some schemes or maps to serve as our guidelines. And then once we sort of become more grounded in a practice, especially the development of mindfulness and sampajanya, clear comprehension, then we could see into our own minds, and we could see when the mind is being driven by unwholesome tendencies, become more sensitive to the effects of our thoughts, of our actions, of our intentions upon the state of our mind. And that helps us to distinguish what is unwholesome and what is wholesome, even on a very, very subtle level. And then as we, develop in this way, then we gain this Dhamma, it's called the Dhamma Vicaya, so Sambojjhanga, the enlightenment factor of discrimination of qualities. So we're able to distinguish the qualities of the mind, what is unwholesome, what is wholesome. So we begin by relying, it's very important to rely on the guidelines laid down by the Buddha, and these help us to develop our own minds, to develop stronger mindfulness and clear comprehension. And then through mindfulness and clear comprehension, then we can see more clearly and know for ourselves what is unwholesome, what is wholesome. Okay, I think we'll have to end for the day now. So, okay, so we usually end with 3 half bows, right? Okay, so we'll end with 3 half bows. This thing just made a noise. Is it coming back to life? No. I just hope that I have the password. Otherwise, I'm forever locked out of this computer. Okay. Okay.